Hello, everybody, and welcome to Timing is Everything, a program of Care Dimensions. My name is Mary Crowe, Director of Professional and Community Education at Care Dimensions. I'm so thrilled to have April Evans on today, who is our Manager of Bereavement Services at Care Dimension. And we're going to talk about a really important topic today about grief and mourning during COVID-19. April, thanks so much for being on.
You're welcome.
So tell us, before we get started and dive into this really important information, tell us a little bit about you and your role at Care Dimensions.
Okay. So I am the manager of bereavement services at Care Dimensions, and there are a lot of services that we offer to people who are grieving. We offer groups, individual counseling, and also services of remembrance a couple times a year, phone calls, letters, recommendations for things to read and such. So we do all of that. Got a good staff of about a dozen people, always very busy. And myself, I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. Have been at the agency for 4 years and have a really great team of other folks who are all licensed mental health professionals or social workers.
Yeah, this is such a time when I'm sure that you're in great demand right now, April, more than ever. I mean, certainly, grief it's always prevalent, but certainly even more so now. Due to this pandemic, millions of people are losing people and things that they love deeply. They need or even desire. So many things, so many losses right now. And so as a result of these losses, grief is something that many are facing. I think we could even say, everyone is facing at some level, right? I think that, the palpable sense of collective grief that's going on in this world right now is just so pronounced. So talk a little bit, I was certainly going to get into specifics about the grief and the uniqueness of that during the pandemic, but can you just do a bit of an overview for people so they understand some of the terminology we're talking about today? Like, what is grief?
Absolutely. So we usually think about grief as something that we feel and experience after a loved one dies. And that is very, very true and very much what we'll focus on today. But basically, in a more general way, grief is just the loss of something that we are attached to. And we are human beings. We are hardwired to be attached to our families and to those in our communities and those that we love so that we can survive as individuals and as a species. So we have those hardwired ways of being attached to people. But also, we also get attached to things such as, where we live, the jobs that we have, how we see ourselves in the world, what our roles are, as sister, brother, mother, colleague, neighbor, and also to dreams that we have and for the future, let's say, or for when we retire, or for traveling that we want to do, or for greeting our great grandbaby when they're born. And unfortunately, a lot of those things we also lose, or they change over time, and we grieve that when those changes happen because we're used to it being a certain way. It's like a habit that we have, a way of being that we know that we are somebody's daughter, let's say. And so when we no longer have a mother or our father, we experience grief. We miss them. We miss the person who died, but we also miss everything that was attached to being their son or daughter, for instance.
Really important point that you bring up is it because I think people are so focused on it, and it certainly is such a powerful loss of somebody we love. but there's also, like you say, all of these other attachments that we have. And I think it's really important because I think some people are feeling feelings they don't even understand that are our grief. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of those emotional responses that people have to loss.
Absolutely. So there are many possible emotional responses to loss, whether it's the death of someone we love, or it's a job that we have, or a role that we play in life. When that changes, we feel a lot, and we will all feel things a bit differently, and maybe in a different order, or maybe some things that will surprise us when we feel them. Like, why am I feeling this? This doesn't, you're just supposed to feel sad when someone that you love dies, when in fact, perhaps, you're feeling some anger about the loss, maybe because um, because of how the person died, because of what their end of life was like.
Again, what you're talking, there's different factors that come into place, right? In terms
Right.
like
So,
what, yeah, some factors that affect people's grieving. So, because it's not a
right.
cookie cutter, is it? I mean, this is really individualized.
It's very individualized. And um, so some of the other emotions that we may feel when someone that we love dies is disbelief. In the beginning, it's very hard just to understand that someone who's always been here in our life, or has been with us, day in, day out, for many years, such as a spouse or partner, is no longer here. It's very, very hard to comprehend. And in fact, it takes a long time to comprehend. And it's one of those things that you have to understand um, again and again and again over time, in just a slightly different way. But we may also feel pretty common are for emotional reactions are intense feelings. And kind of the metaphor that we use are waves of feelings. So, or sometimes people may talk about a roller coaster of feelings. So, you feel intensely, when you're grieving.
Yes.
So maybe it is the sadness. Oftentimes it's also loneliness.
Mhm.
And that, of course, is exacerbated by the pandemic and the social distancing that we have, some of the isolation that we've had to adhere to just in order to survive the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I think that's important for people too to understand that, because again, people, I think, get so uncomfortable with some of these feelings that they're experiencing, and it's just so overwhelming. But I think it's important for people to know that, we grieve deeply because we love deeply, and that grief
Exactly.
is different for every person. Grief, as hard as it is, as overwhelming as the feelings can be, it's how we heal. And I think that that's really important too, because like I said, if people get shaken up, by the feelings, and they think they're doing something wrong, when in fact what they're experiencing is very natural and part of the process.
Absolutely. And sometimes people, a feeling that can surprise people when they're grieving is relief.
Mhm.
And that could really come if perhaps you're a long-term caregiver for somebody. And when they've died, there's an enormous responsibility that's off your shoulders, and that can feel like a relief. And then you can, sort of secondary to that, you may feel kind of guilty for feeling relief. So these emotions just come fast and hard, and very greatly. And also, especially right now during the pandemic, there can be feelings of guilt.
Yep.
So right now we talk about like survivor's guilt.
Mhm.
Why did I had COVID, and why did I survive and my son did not, or my partner did not?
Yeah.
But guilt is also just part of normal grieving, because most of us have. It's not a requirement of grieving, but it's normal because most of us, have regrets, or have things that we wish we could have said or wish we could have done differently. And all of that is sort of, we're reminded of all of things when we're grieving, when we've lost
Just
somebody.
hardwired, aren't we? We're just hardwired for guilt. It's just,
Exactly.
it's so hard as human beings. We'll always find something to kick ourselves about, won't we? No
Yeah.
matter how hard we work as caregivers or this, that, trying to do the right thing, we'll always find something. And I think it's a part of human nature, isn't it?
Yes.
April, let's talk about what are some of the losses that people are grieving as a result of the pandemic right now?
Well, we talk about in kind of the grief world, we talk about the loss of the assumptive world. And so what we mean by that is what we assume our world is and should be, we have now seen shaken up and in some cases lost. So as simple as, sending our children to school, or an eighth grader or a 12th grader or a college student graduating. Well, we know people all get together, there's a public ceremony, we get to have the light shined on us and feel proud of our accomplishments. And that's not the case. That hasn't been the case in the past year, and that can be very hard. But other things that we assume too, such as the work that we do, or where we live. People have lost jobs. People have lost, where they live, their homes or their apartments, or are experiencing the anxiety because they're afraid that they will lose that, or that they will lose somebody that they love.
Yeah. So it's the anticipation, even the worry, the uncertainty.
Yes.
I think that, what I find in my work, April, is that the word uncertainty just keeps coming. I just keep hearing so many people that talk about that, and like you say, we do live in an assumptive world, and that was snatched, wasn't it, about over a year ago? So here we are, and I think that's so hard for people. We live with just thinking that we're going to get up and we're going to have our lives and our freedoms and our predictable futures and all of these things that we just take for granted, roles and ways of life, and now this is a huge sense of loss and a weight for people, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
And this anticipatory grief, right? There's a level of that going on, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, when will it end?
Yeah.
And how do you plan for the future when you don't know what's going to be allowed in the future?
Right.
How do you even plan for, summer camp for your kids?
Yeah.
Because will they have summer camp or will they not?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a collective anxiety.
Sure.
That we have about, what will be true, what will be possible, what will be so in a month, in 3 months, So yeah, there's sort of an overall sense kind of in the air, almost like static electricity of anxiety.
Sure.
That we are all sharing.
Yeah. Well, life as we know it has changed. And it's interesting when I hear people say, when will things get back to normal? Well, life has forever changed. It doesn't mean it's not going to be good again. It's just forever changed too, isn't it? And I think that that's hard, as you mentioned. We're creatures of habit. We do like our rituals and but things like I said, they can be good, but maybe different. So having this kind of an event can certainly change so many things. How does grief, how is it different now than can be in ordinary times?
Well, what we find working with people who are specifically grieving the loss of a loved one, we find that grief is prolonged. It lasts longer than it might have lasted, than it would have lasted without this pandemic.
Yeah.
And one of those reasons is that we can't do the things that we would normally do to mourn a death. There have, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, there were times when people couldn't have funerals at all. or wakes at all.
Yeah.
And even now that it's limited in terms of how many people can be there.
Mhm.
And, there are some people who it matters a lot to them that their loved one have a lot of people who show up for their funeral or for their wake
Mhm.
or for a memorial service. And now it can only be 10.
Yeah.
Or they can't do it in the place that they would like to do it, or how they would like to do it, or how the family's tradition has always been.
Yeah.
Um, so how we're able to how we're able to mourn with other people has really been severely curtailed during this time, and that tends to sort of we hang on to that grief kind of gets stuck a bit in us because we don't have the natural outlets that we want and need for
Yeah.
that.
I think that's a big deal, don't you? I mean, really, the effect, like you're saying, which has been on observances and all, these are things that we need. This is part of that healing process that is so necessary. And we don't have that right now. And we really, I think, again, kind of underestimate how important that is. And I think that has been a big issue for people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in addition to grief being prolonged, we also see grief delayed in many cases, and sometimes that's because perhaps a loved one has died during this time, but we're also struggling with the fact that that we're also been furloughed,
Mhm.
and the unemployment isn't as much as the wage was, and when will it run out, and how will we get food on the table and keep shelter over our heads, and take care of all these other things, or even if we don't have to, even if we're blessed enough not to have to worry about the very basics, we're still sort of in this space of anxiety about the future and how things are now, and not getting sick, and protecting ourselves. And so mourning the loss, really grieving that a very specific loss, can be kind of put off. We have these other things that we just have to do to survive right now. So sometimes we do find people who felt just sort of stunned, or had to focus on basic needs for
Yeah.
3, 6, 9 months.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they feel like, oh my God, now I'm grieving. I thought I should have done this before.
Yeah. So you have almost like a little bit delayed reaction. And people there's certainly, it can be complicated, right? People can be this puts people at a higher risk for complicated grief.
Absolutely. And part of that is that there can be, in many situations, there's been a, a traumatic element to a death. So, for instance, somebody gets sick and you've taken them to the hospital, and then that's the last you got to see them. You didn't get to go into the hospital with them. You didn't get to visit them at the hospital. If you were fortunate, many nurses and people at the hospitals, have been doing their very best to try to, make it so that someone who is dying or who might be dying can see their loved ones, on an iPad or something. But you couldn't be there in person, and you didn't expect to be saying goodbye. You didn't get to say goodbye. You didn't get to hold their hand. So there's that traumatic element that's for many people during this time that's also added into the mix, and makes grief more complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what would you suggest to people? What are some tips that might help people who are grieving at this time?
Hmm. Well, the first thing I'm going to say is try to be easy on yourself. Try to know that you are doing the best that you can right now,
Mhm.
and it's always hard to lose someone that you love. There's always grief. There's always a process. There's always tough emotions involved.
Mhm.
Um, but now it's so much more complex, convoluted of a situation where you can't be with the people that you love in the way that you need to be with them, either at a memorial or some sort of ritual to grieve the loss,
Yeah.
or just to, just to spend the day hanging out, and doing something um, that so that you're not thinking about the person that you love 24/7.
Yeah.
So we don't have those connections. So we want to find how can we find it, we need to be creative about how we can stay in contact with people and stay connected. So, there's Zoom, but there you don't even have to, it can just be the telephone.
Yeah.
It can even be it could even be, letter writing,
Yeah.
but staying in communication in whatever way possible is so key, because grieving in isolation will always be more difficult than
Yeah.
grieving with support.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think it's important too, don't you, right now, I know that observances and other funeral and services in that way have been altered dramatically. And as you mentioned, postponed or even deferred, even to do something though. It's
Right.
hard, because to put it off, it like we talked about earlier, it's part of this process. So having something, even if you end up doing something later, but having something now at the time also, don't you think?
Absolutely. So again, being creative and thinking, and sometimes when you're grieving, it's hard to be creative. So again, ask a friend, ask another family member, what can we do? I hate that we can't have the funeral for dad, with everybody there that we want. What could we do instead? So some of the ideas that that people have spoken about and actually done include things like setting aside a specific time each day. Maybe and it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to go get sad now for the next 2 hours, but more like maybe, depending on how your day rolls, that it's 9 to 9:10 in the evening each night, before you turn in for bed, that you're going to do something that feels like a ritual for you, that's focused on your loved one. So maybe it's lighting a candle that's standing next to their picture, or maybe it's playing their favorite song. Maybe it's but we can also incorporate other things that our loved one that help us feel connected to our loved one, like baking their favorite cookie,
Yeah.
and sharing it, or those little things. They seem so kind of trivial, but they really do meet a specific need.
Yeah.
For grieving and for mourning our loved one. It
Yeah.
helps us feel connected to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I found myself, I don't really cook, but I had my aunts and my grandmother were Italian bakers, and I find myself baking their recipes now.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with what you're talking about, just feeling a need to connect to the people that I love and who I've lost too. And you had just said something so important. We have to take time to grieve. There's one way in terms of getting to a healing point or to the other side. We have to go through it, and as hard as it is to experience those feelings, it is so necessary. So I think you're giving such great suggestions. So what else can we do too? Like, how can we support others? Because like you said, we are social beings. Part of the services and all, we're coming together to share in that experience. And here we are, and we don't have that. So what can we do for other people? How can we reach out to them at this critical time?
Well, reaching out to them at all is important. Making a connection with them. And I would say the most important thing is making sure that they know that they can speak to us about their grief, or just about the happy memories of the person that they lost. So basically, it's really listening with a soft heart, with an open heart, and allowing that time. And if somebody needs to tell us the same story for the fifth time, you know, it's knowing that I can listen to this story again. It's being heard. Grief needs to be heard. It needs to be expressed.
Yeah.
Which is, why people may write letters to their deceased loved one, or or even, or just, if you're meeting with a counselor,
Right.
a lot of that is about, with grief counseling, a lot of that is just about devoting a specific time where that you get to talk about the person who died. You get to talk about how you're feeling now. You get to talk about anything that you're struggling with, or what you're remembering, or what your dreams were.
Yeah. 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 And I think, I want to go back for a second about when you're saying about needing to repeat or tell the story. I think sometimes people think, oh my gosh, they're losing it. No, people need to retell the story. It's part of the healing process, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very much is.
Yeah.
And if you're finding, if you're finding that you've kind of feeling that you're becoming, maybe if you're grieving, you feel like you're becoming, maybe you're feeling like you're becoming a burden on those around you, because you feel like you need to keep talking about it. Well, first of all, you can ask them, is this just a drag? Is this like a burden? Is this okay?
Yeah.
But another option is to look for a grief group.
Yes.
Grief groups or support groups are excellent opportunities, where you do get to share your story. And that is exactly what the time is for.
That's a great point. And right now too, I think it's important that people have an opportunity, because people think that everything is shut down because of the pandemic, but there are grief groups going on virtually, correct?
There absolutely are.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's what people need to know, that even though, again, things have changed in terms of how they can get the support is out there. It's out there. So how would people, because you guys offer so many amazing things, April, and just such a strong group of bereavement counselors there at the Bertillon Center for Grief and Healing, how can people get in touch?
Well, you can get in touch either by just going to the Care Dimensions website, which is www.caredimensions.org. And you'll see right away on the main page that there's a little tab that says grief. You open that up and you're going to see all about our services. There will be flyers for upcoming groups and upcoming workshops that we're offering. And we also have a resources page. So some people are, maybe you don't quite feel ready to be part of a group, or to share your story with anyone other than your, intimate family, your close family members. But we also include their resources, which include some very excellent other websites and readings. There's some amazing YouTube videos out there on grief and loss. There's so many things that you can access still, and so you can find that through our website.
Right.
As well as the listing of all of our groups. And, or you can certainly just call the Bertillon Center for Grief and Healing. And that number is 855-774-5100. Please know that we're not able to answer the phone live as often as we would like to at this point, for not being directly in the office and for the volume that's coming our way. But please leave us a voicemail. We will absolutely get back to you, usually the same day.
Right.
So those are the ways. Or also just remember, an easy email to remember is grief@caredimensions.org. And you can ask us any questions or tell us what you're looking for, and we'll get back to you.
Perfect. Well, sadly, we're out of time, but I want to thank you so very much for being on the program today. This is really important information that you shared, and we really appreciate you taking the time out right now.
Absolutely. There's so much to say. I feel like we've just barely
and
that's barely started the conversation.
Yeah. So maybe we have a part 2, April, so that we can get a little deeper in it for people, because it's so hard, because we are scratching the surface. But thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Home. More than ever, it's your sanctuary. But if you're caring for a loved one with advanced illness, it can feel isolating and worrisome. Care Dimensions can help. As Massachusetts' leading hospice provider, you can count on us for guidance, medical care, and support. We follow all COVID-19 safety precautions to protect you and your family, so you don't have to delay getting the care you need. Visit Care Dimensions online or give us a call.